Hey guys, welcome back to the Far Better Podcast. This is Season 8, Episode 1, and we have the opportunity to do something very unique. This episode is not just myself. I'll introduce my guest in just a moment. If you've seen the episode title, you've already seen who it is, but allow me to keep the suspense going for just a brief moment longer. We have big news at the end of this season that we're going to be giving, and I want to make sure everybody kind of knows that this season has a direction that we're going in. And I began to think about what I wanted to talk about for Season 8, and I just kept coming back in my mind to 1 Corinthians 6, 13 and 14. And the version that I normally use is the New King James Version. It actually doesn't have the phrase that I'm looking for in the verse at all, and so I'm going to use the ESV today to start it out. Please don't hurt me. I'm just kidding. If you don't have an issue with that, that's great. If not, I don't have a major problem with the ESV or anything like that. It's just a personal version use that I use. 1 Corinthians 16, by the way, that I'm meaning about here. 1 Corinthians 16, 13 and 14. So before we jump into that, let's introduce our guest. Wayne, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
It's doing so great.
It's like we never get together and do this.
We never, ever once do this. And 10 seconds in, I already made a mistake. But Wayne caught it and texted me.
Man.
I appreciate it. I don't know why I said 6. I must have been thinking 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11, which also has to do with what we're talking about this season. But Wayne, the season this year is far better by quitting. And that seems like such a wonderful way to begin a season, is just quitting. But there are so many different things we're going to be talking about, and I'm excited to talk about each of these things. For example, one of the things that we're going to really be looking at is quitting different types of activities, different types of mindsets. But I wanted to introduce the season today by just kind of saying, what is it all about? What's the purpose? Why is quitting important? And that's where 1 Corinthians 16, 13, and 14 really come into play. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong, and let all that you do be done in love. Some translations, like the King James Version, the American Standard, NASB, they use the phraseology, quit you like men. And before we hit record, Wayne was saying, what that's essentially meaning is quit being babies and act like men. And I think that's a really great way to put it. And when we look at the subject matter of quitting, Wayne and I have a very unique ability to say that we know what it's like to quit something. And sometimes we quit things because we have no other choice, and I'll let Wayne talk about that. When things happen, you're kind of told, no, you got to quit. You don't want to quit, but you're told basically you're done, and you got to move on and figure out how to navigate with that. Other times it's a realization. You look at life and say, I really should quit. I really need to stop doing this. So, Wayne, let's talk about the Navy, because when we were talking about joining up for this episode, I got a perspective I didn't even realize. I didn't know about the reason that you left the Navy. So tell people about what kind of spawned all of that to happen with your injury.
When I went in the Navy, I went in with the idea that I was going to be career Navy, and actually was on a kind of a fast track going into a warrant officer program, and that was part of the plan, and the plan in my head at least, and the plan that even my superiors were actually kind of driving me to, and so they were trying to help fast track me to that program. And I actually was out to sea, got hurt my knee real bad. I was aviation ordnance, got hurt in a loading accident, and not my fault, but it just happened. One of those things that happen to you. But anyway, came back, had to have surgery. Ended up that was a time period, governmentally speaking, where they were downsizing the military, and so if you weren't 100% on a particular day that they had set at that time, then they were going to medically discharge you. And so that was the news that I got, and I was trying to work through it, still trying to do all of my qualifications, all the things I was doing in my head. I'm still working toward this goal, and it was, and that side of it was all still progressing at the same time. The medical board that I had had to meet with said, if you can't go to the fleet today, basically, if you can't fly out and meet the ship today, then you are going to be medically discharged. And at that point in time, I was still, I was just a couple weeks past walking with crutches. And if you've ever been on a Navy ship or know anything about it, you know, at every bulkhead, you walk through a door, and there's a knee knocker, what we call a knee knocker. You step over about a foot, about a 12-inch knee knocker, or whatever. It was really a shin knocker is what it was. But anyway, and then there's ladders everywhere because you're up and down constantly. And so I could fake and kind of slide down a ladder and get by with that, but I couldn't go up the ladders. I couldn't climb a ladder yet. And so I was not able to do that, much less go back to my job lifting 500-pound bombs, right, with a team. And so that just wasn't going to work. And so I couldn't go back to the fleet. And so at that point in time, they said, you're done. We're helping you quit. In other words, it wasn't the news that I wanted to hear. I was rather disenfranchised. I was quite upset. I was a new Christian, but I was, trying to understand about the church and the kingdom and grow at the same time. I got hit with this, and it was at a time that was a rough patch in my life, spiritually speaking. And even physically speaking, sure. Was trying to work through a lot of different things and figure out, okay, well, what am I going to do now? Mm-hmm. Of course, that led to some other doors opening, and eventually being asked to preach and to do that and to fill in preach. And then that led to me. I want to learn more about this. I want to do this. And so that opened up other doors. And so, yes, I was made to quit, but it also pushed me into some areas that I may not have otherwise done so. Yeah. Been a career Navy guy. I would have been deployed a lot in that particular position. And so it might not have worked well for certainly a good spiritual home, for my wife, for children, and things like that. It would have been a lot different life. And so not that, men and women can't be faithful while they're in service, because I know plenty that have been, but it would have certainly made it much more difficult.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to look back now and realize that so much of what you do today is shaped by something like that, and you don't even realize it in the moment. And you look back and go, huh, that worked out. I'm glad that happened and took me the way that I needed to go. How old were you around the time that this was happening?
21.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can understand, here you are at the peak of your physical fitness, supposed to be able to handle anything, and then to be basically, like you said, we're helping you quit. That's a tough thing. And at any time in life when you're younger and you're told you can't do something the way that you'd like to do it anymore, that's frustrating. I remember, on a separate side of things, nowhere near to the same degree of what you were told to do, but I remember the doctor, kind of coming in and telling me that I had to start quitting some of the things I like doing and, stop eating fruits and vegetables, stop eating salad. And it's like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. Would you quit doing that? That's not real. You're making this up. And then you think about it, for the better of my health at that time, I couldn't eat those things that were actually worse for my body than better because of my Crohn's disease. And so sometimes you're told to quit when you don't even really want to. And I think 1 Corinthians 16 really kind of puts that in perspective, because that whole chapter, is coming off the heels of being abounding in the work of the Lord, being in abundance of doing what's right. And that requires us to quit doing things the way that we did. And it's the same writer who said, when I was a child, I spoke as a child and I did it. But when I became a man, I put away these childish things. I quit being a child. I quit acting like I didn't know better. And so much of what we see today is kind of more along the lines of, do whatever you want. God will understand. God will have to quit his view, not the other way around. And yet Scripture tells me time and time again, I have to quit doing things that are wrong. When you think about quitting, Wayne, what other things might come to your mind that are important to kind of note as to why we need to realize when it's time to quit?
Certainly, I think early on in in my Christian walk, there were things that I was certainly learning.
Yeah.
And coming from a Navy background and a background in where just not being around Christianity, true Christianity, but not even being around, or I should say, being around a lot of people who were living of the world. Right. And so there was a lot of things I had to learn how to quit. And so some of that was my language, some of that was the things I was participating in, and so not at all proud of those things. I'm proud of the fact that I left those things, that I did quit those things, but it also takes time to learn those things. And so, when I read something like 1 Corinthians 16:13, watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong. It's act like men, quit you like men. It's the idea of growth that is taking place, and so that's part of that faith growing in my life, and that obviously comes from studying the Word of God. So you soon realize there are things that I've got to leave. We sing the song with our young people at VBS sometimes, the things I used to do, I don't do them anymore. Things I used to say, I don't say them anymore. It's always funny that we do that with our youngest kids at VBS. Well, they're not doing those things yet, probably, but so it's really kind of an adult song, I would say. But anyway, I digress. But I think about the fact that this is about our growth in faith. We learn that there are things, okay, I can no longer do this. The Bible says that I'm not to participate in alcoholic beverage. I should not be participating in filthy communication. I should not be participating in some of those things that are of the world. I have to no longer love the things of the world. 1 John 2:15-17. So there's a process of growing up, and so this no longer being babes, but growing, quit you like men, act like men, be strong, be growing, and then to get to a point that you can actually stand fast. And so there are things that you're going to be watchful for. I love that contextually in this chapter, some of the things that are going on, this is while Paul mentions some of his plans. Actually, earlier, like in the middle part of this chapter, 5 through 12 is really about, okay, here are the plans that I've got laid out, and so and he even makes the statement in one section in verse 7, I hope to stay with you a while if the Lord permits. Mm-hmm. And so we have to learn also that, okay, I can make my plans, and James says, that we need to plan, but we need to plan according to the Lord's will. And I don't know always exactly what that is, but I need to always be doing things that are holy things and righteous things. And so if I'm doing that, then my planning of my life and things like that, they're going to naturally fall then within the Lord's plan, if that makes sense. So if I'm doing those things that are pleasing unto the Lord, then my a specific decision, whether I do this thing that is good or if I do this thing that is good, neither of these things are bad. Okay, this is all within the Lord's will. I can do either one of these things, and He's going to use me to His glory. And so I think that it's just interesting that that's all within the planning that Paul has as he's closing out this chapter.
And I guess too, another thing that you and I have the ability to speak on. It sounds negative when we say it this way, but there's really no other way to say it. We have a fancy word that makes us feel better about it, I guess. The word resign. But resign really means that you're going to quit working at a place. You're going to stop doing that. Now, I think the difficulty is most people, when they hear I quit, they think of it as I stormed in and I gave them a piece of my mind, and then I said, and by the way, I quit, and I walked out and the music is crescendoing and everything is happening triumphantly, when in reality quitting is just simply putting in your 2 weeks notice in a regular job, and in a work of the church like being a minister as we have done, it's going to the elders and saying, we love y'all, we really are thankful for the time we've had to be together, but it's time for me to quit being here and start being in this area where there's an area of ministry that I can go and do that is fulfilling for me or fulfilling for my family. So let's talk a little bit about how to quit properly, because I do think there are some stories that we could tell that we've heard throughout the years, and I'll make one up just so that we're not throwing anybody under the bus, but it wouldn't be the wisest thing to not tell your elders that you're going to be resigning and just stand up on a random Sunday and say, by the way, this is my last Sunday. That wouldn't go over well. And you there's some decorum that has to be done here. But it's not a secular job where you put in a 2 weeks notice. So of the two of us, we have left more than one local work. Combined, it's like 45 local works that we've left. But we've left more than one local work. And let's talk a little bit about the decorum. I'd like to know from your perspective how you approached it, and then we can talk about how I approached it as well. Maybe bridge the gap of here's a great way that two people have tried to do it the best we can, because I think that in both of the situations that we could talk about with each other, 9 times out of 10 when a preacher leaves a work, it's a positive reunion when he gets to go back and reunite with them. And that 10th time where it's not necessarily so positive, it might just be a fluke, it might be a deeper problem, and it might just be that's just the way it is. Some people come into your life for a season, and sometimes they stay for a reason, and so that's just kind of how it goes. But talk about kind of the approach that you have tried to employ, that's a really good word to use with quit, when you have resigned from a work.
The last thing that you want to do is take the Johnny Paycheck version of it, take this job, and so we don't want to do that. And getting up, like you say, and just announcing it certainly is not the way to go about it. There's certainly better ways to do it, and I'm though I've had to do it a couple of times. I say had to do it, though I've done it a couple of times. There's, one of the things that I've tried to, even when the situation was not the best, and my leaving was, it was time. Then in some of those situations, I still want to. The last thing that I want to do is cause a disruption in the congregation. And the last thing that I would certainly want to do would be to divide the congregation and allow the congregation to think for a moment that he's just leaving because he's mad, and try to, make some kind of covert statement, to the congregation, so they go, oh, okay, something's going on here, and to even when I maybe have not been treated the best, I still want the congregation, because this is the Lord's body, I still want them to be in unity with one another. I still want them to be able to trust an eldership. And there may be situations where, not in my situation, but where other preachers have had to leave, where the elders had not done right, and there were bad situations. Okay, well, that's a different scenario. But in this situation for me, most times I wanted to leave, and I wanted to leave. It's the same thing we say, let's leave it better than when we came. Yeah. And so even if I'm leaving on not so the best terms, then I still want to leave it better than when I came. Right. And that's, so whatever that takes sometimes, and me choosing my words well, in statements that I make, in conversations that I have after announcements have been made, because people want to pull you aside and say, okay, what's going on,
tell us
and
the scoop.
you can't do that,
Mm-hmm.
And so And I think that in most situations, I've been able to go back and have that positive reaction, and there's still families that I'm close to in every one of those congregations, even if the leadership wasn't as close, and so, but I'm thankful in the last situation, and maybe you were going to set that up, but in the last when I left Eastside, and I love Eastside, and it's been it was a great relationship, and a wonderful working environment, and I'm so thankful. They've now hired a new preacher, and everything's moving forward. And it didn't take them that long, so there wasn't a big time in between. But I'm thankful that they were that they would let me also be able to communicate with the congregation, that they trusted me enough to communicate with the congregation about what was going on. We weren't, in fact, the work that we're doing now with 416 Ministries, we thought initially we would be doing it out of Eastside, and so we would just be there, right on, and be able to work basically out of there as kind of our home base. Thankful to be where we are with Memphis School of Preaching, because that really just kind of kickstarted this ministry in a way that it would have taken a lot longer. But also they understood that. They got that, and they saw that this work was okay. They're not just leaving to go to necessarily another preaching work in the sense of going to another congregation. They're going to go do this, and they could see that, and so they were on board with that, and they got it. But here's the key to all of this: being able to quit well means that you've communicated well. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is both with leadership, being able to do so with the congregation, and also private conversations that happen later. You still need to communicate well and rightly, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting, since you did yours, I'll do mine. When I left Somerville, one of the hardest parts about that was the length of time it took to work details out and to struggle, with what I wanted to be doing, like you said, not just leave for another preaching job, but do something that gave me the ability to make an eternal impact even greater. And recruiting students to be preachers, I love Somerville, and I'm thankful for the 5 years I got to work with them, and I'm grateful that they've had me back to preach and fill in for Ryan and do other things and be there when they needed me to be there. And I'm grateful for all that we have. That they helped me grow in a way that I couldn't have grown just on my own. There's no doubt about it. But then when you get to the point and you're getting ready to leave a work and you're going to announce that you're leaving, I remember, and he might even be listening to this, but I remember one of our deacons was going to be gone the Sunday I was announcing. And I thought, I hate that he'll be out of town. It's always a family camping trip they take. I believe that, just always how it worked out. And so I gave him a call, and I said, hey, you're going to know this before anyone else knows, because I don't want you being blindsided Sunday. But part of the reason I felt so confident in doing that was the relationship that we had built for 5 years while we were together was so deep that I felt like I didn't want him hearing from, the rumor mill. I wanted them hearing it from me. And that's, like you said, wanting to communicate well so that people are not blindsided by this. And it was a hard thing to say I was leaving. And it's hard when you leave, you say you're leaving and you're not leaving within 2 weeks, because you have like a month. And that last month there or more sometimes, is it maybe some places have a 30-day contract, some have 90 days. Those are difficult in some ways, not that they're wrong, but they're difficult because that sweet elderly lady's going to come over and pull on your arm and go, now what can we do to get you to stay?
Every week.
And, and so call you even every day, like, now what can we do? And I remember one of our elders, it was my last, Wednesday. And he even said, is there anything we can do? And it's just like, man, I love you guys. I don't like leaving you behind and not being with you anymore every Sunday and every week. But there's this understanding, I think, sometimes where you just kind of know. that it's time. And it's not an indication that the church is necessarily bad. Sometimes that might be the case. I'm thankful that for me it wasn't, and I'm thankful with Eastside for you. The works that we left, we loved them. We would go back in a heartbeat and do a one-day Sunday for them if they were in a pinch and we could help. We would go and set up camp and door knock for them. We'd do whatever we could to help them. But there was a moment where we both came to the realization of, it's time. And I remember being in preaching school and hearing the instructors tell us, you'll know when it's time. And I remember being like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. No offense to my instructors, but I remember thinking that's the most foolish advice I think I've ever heard. And the ignorance in my youth that I really experienced there, because I remember there was just a day where I was talking to my dad, and he made it known there was a possibility of this being available. And it was like instantaneous understanding of, I need to quit. Mm-hmm. And I need to do this if I can. And it was so strange because in that moment, I said a mental note of forgiveness for all the negative thoughts I ever had about the instructor saying, you'll know when it's time, and me being like, that's not true. Because it is. You just wake up one day and realize, okay, this is the time to do this, and this is how I'm going to do it. When we talk about quitting, communicating well, how does the side of this from a preacher work where maybe give a do and don't as we're kind of wrapping this up? Something to do in communicating well and something not to do.
Sometimes you have to learn not to overshare. Mm-hmm. And so maybe don't overshare. And that's going to probably sound weird for some folks, but
makes a lot of sense to me.
Maybe only preachers might get this. I don't know, but I think that one of the things that you want to make sure that you do is, especially with your elders, you want to be up front with them as soon as you can, and so that they have to shift their mindset all of a sudden.
Right.
And because unfortunately you've disrupted the flow of work that normally happens.
Yeah.
You have taken their attention and turned it solely on, okay, we've got to replace him, and maybe that's not the best word, but that's the word that I'm going to use. You got to be replaced.
That's right.
If you're quitting, you got to be replaced.
That's right.
And so I would think that though you want to be as upfront with them about what you can, and when I say overshare, really what I mean, especially in that initial meeting, is because I think you'll have opportunity typically to have more conversations with your elders, and it's like you've just shocked their thoughts. You've just, and so the more that you keep on, they're not taking all of that in. They're not getting all of that, and so there may be a time better suited for more conversation, maybe about some things that they could do better. Okay, maybe this is not the time to bring that up.
Right.
That's a conversation. That's an outgoing, an exit meeting later to be had.
Right.
Not a, hey, I'm quitting, and by the way, here's some things you could do better. That's probably not the best.
Right.
So maybe that got the good and the don't.
Yeah, well, and I think you're right. I mean, and elders have the right to request an exit interview with us. They have a right to request an exit interview for themselves too, if they wanted to do such a thing. That's not outside of their scope of ability.
I would hope they would, that they would be men who could take the critiques. And hopefully if you've been having at least a yearly evaluation, the critiquing is not, on the way out. It may include the whole time I've been here. Here's some things that happened that could have been maybe handled better, that might what you're also trying to do by leaving it better than when you came was also leaving it better for the next guy that comes in,
right,
and however many down the road in the future. So being able though to be, if you have a good enough relationship with those men, then you can typically say what you need to say, and you also know the best way to say it. And so those are things that I think that those are definitely the do's. Don't go in there just blasting. Just even if you want to, it's kind of like where you type out the email, you get it all out, and then you delete it.
right.
Sometimes we just need to, maybe I need to say it where I can say it out loud to my wife. This is what I want to say, but I know I can't say.
Mm-hmm.
And, because then maybe they want to say some things too that they couldn't say, or that they shouldn't say. So just don't go in there blasting.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing too is, from the preacher side of this, since you took the elder's approach of, being willing to listen to those critiques, it's my responsibility to do the same thing. And like you said, if you're getting a yearly review or evaluation anyway, hopefully the elders don't go, now here's everything we have to say to you, and they pull out some massive binder of all of these things. But
an Excel spreadsheet.
Exactly.
Here's what I have.
But what I need to be willing to do is just saying, especially if I'm leaving from one church work to another church work as a minister,
sure,
what can I do better? And then be willing to take it on the chin and deal with it. The old adage, nobody's perfect. You're not going to be a perfect person. It's not going to work out that way. So all of us can have room to improve. But leaving it better for the next person, in part, is also leaving in a way that they're not scarred by me leaving.
Right.
And there have been plenty of preachers throughout history that have left in a way that has scarred the congregation, and that hurts the next guy who may do nothing wrong, may be the exact right person for that work, but because of what the last guy did, it puts him in a bind. And so, Wayne, as we bring this to a close, because we are at 32 minutes, sorry, guys, I think you like this, so Wayne's pretty cool. What would be a final thought or a final scripture that you would want to bring forth if you've got one?
Let's just keep on our passage there in verse 14. Let all that you do be done with love.
That's right. That's right. Well, guys, this is Season 8. Far better by quitting. Next week, Wayne will be back, and we'll be talking about far better by quitting and the idea of quit running from opportunity. And we'll have a unique perspective on that because we're going to talk about both sides of that coin, when you should quit running from opportunity and when you shouldn't run to the opportunity. And so we'll talk about that next week. Maybe you can go ahead and guess who we're going to talk about. Maybe not. I don't know. Good luck. But until next week, let's remember to please God now so our eternity can be far better.